Yes, systems are broken. Yes, it's going to take time to kind of even bring coherence to the momentum forward. But the low-hanging fruit is right there for the picking, and we're not taking action enough on harvesting that fruit. For Edmund, from a human's right lens, where do you see change needed, whether it's the source or the management?
Thank you very much. So I think when you're talking about the peace, plastic, planet, we also want to emphasize people. So from the Commission's level, we are looking at human rights and how environment intersects with human rights. We are recognizing that people have environmental rights, and those rights must be respected. So the Commission has been negotiating an ASEAN Declaration on Environmental Rights for the past 2 years, and Malaysia chairs ASEAN next year. It cannot be concluded this year, and ASEAN is looking to Malaysia to actually adopt that declaration under our chairmanship next year. So it's a very crucial year for ASEAN, not just in terms of the specific issue of plastics, but also environmental rights. I will tell you the problem. A lot of countries around ASEAN still have problems with certain core non-negotiables from our perspective. One is indigenous people. So Orang Asli issue is still not recognized. The Orang Aslis are not, the indigenous people are still not recognized in some countries, not us. Second is the question of environmental due diligence. So the word due diligence is still not accepted by certain ASEAN countries. Thirdly, the issue of grievance mechanisms, meaning you need to have effective remedies. When people are affected by pollution, they need to be able to go not only to the courts, but also they need to be able to find remedies with non-state actors. So the declaration is going to be quite new because there will be obligations that will be imposed on non-state actors and businesses. And that is where the business lobby will be very strong, but also the NGO lobby will have to be equally strong, and government will need to balance those interests. And the last point I think that some ASEAN countries feel very sticky about is the issue of political participation. Participation, free and open participation that includes freedom of information. So these are the issues that I think for the past 2 years, some countries have not been comfortable in adopting. And I just want to leave it there to say that Malaysia, under Nick's chairman, leadership, must support a robust, progressive ASEAN Declaration on Environmental Rights and make it a Kuala Lumpur Declaration, because in terms of human rights, ASEAN has had no human rights declaration since 2012. So the 2012 document is an ASEAN Human Rights Declaration that just recognizes in one line, safe, sustainable, clean environment. This new declaration in 2025 that Malaysia has to lead and adopt will be the second human rights declaration, and that will be specifically related to environmental rights. So that is where I want to place where I'm coming from in terms of where I'm sitting. Malaysia, myself, will chair the commission, and we would really like countries like Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, among others, to really spearhead this document. And I think it will be a historical landmark if Malaysia does it as one of our ASEAN deliverables in 2025.
Beautiful, Edmund. Yeah, we got to give a round of applause for that one because it's enlightening me. It's sometimes an often overlooked perspective because we tend to focus so much on the management and the of plastic without considering that element. What is stop? Of course, from a citizen's point of view, it sounds like all the pieces are in place, and it's just about playing the rules. Between Nick and Edmund, what do you think is the checkmate moment here, and how do we get past that?
Well, I think the checkmate moment is that I used to be Edmund's intern. So so I can't really say no to him. But anyway, the real issue is I think there is a greater realization. I think this year, for example, Utusan Malaysia did I think 4 or 5 day feature on the front page on microplastic pollution, and so people are asking that question. And I think when there is awareness, I mean, we like to talk about awareness, and there is a reason to that, because it's only when you're aware of what's the impact of something to you. And I think one of the things that we tend to forget is, when you talk about climate change, when you talk about the environment, when you talk about conservation, sometimes it's very abstract, it's very idealistic, and let's put it this way, not everyone is attracted to that. But the moment you talk about how this impacts your health, and I think a wonderful book is by the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, Breathe, about how he fights for stricter air pollution regulations. It's just by appealing to this thing about your health, your respiratory health, right? So I think similarly for plastics, we are at that moment where people are talking about it. And finally, I mean, now there's, we have government agencies looking at microplastic pollution. And I think one of the scary part is that realizing how little we know about it, as you mentioned, is that it's just like the tip of the iceberg. And you know a lot about smoking, you know a lot about air pollution, but when it comes to plastics, there's like Rumsfeld said, there's the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns, right? And it's scary of the whole spectrum of that. So that I think will give us the push, because at the end of the day, when there is greater realization, we get asked, we get quizzed at forums like this. It does have an impact. It does push politicians, it does push policymakers to take action, right? If there's no awareness, if there's no push, it's a bit difficult to get everything to move. Um, so I think that is why we are at that checkmate moment, as you describe it. And I think, as I think Edmund alluded to, when we talk about an ASEAN Declaration of Human Rights, I mean, I do think that there's a few countries that can take the leadership better than others. And I think if Malaysia do not show that leadership, then it will take some time. We'll miss some more years for us to achieve that. So I think we cannot miss this golden opportunity, because when we are chair, we decide on what's there on the agenda. We have greater moral suasion on the other countries, and this is a time for us to actually make it matter. And plastics is something that really hurts us across the board. When we have plastics that are from across the world, but even in this region, plastics that are being thrown. We have instant noodles that you don't get in Sabah, for example. You get it in Thailand, but the plastics waste reaches Sabah, and so on and so forth. I mean, even the ones that we throw will reach to our neighboring countries. So that shows that if it's just a national approach, it's not going to go far. We need that regional approach. And for so long, we have this ASEAN way of, you mind your own business. I mean, that's the reality of it. This is a time, and the ASEAN Declaration of Human Rights is a way for us to go beyond our borders and see what we can do together as a region.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that perspective. Edmund, you have something to add to it.
I hope. You got so many cameras here, right? I hope what the minister said just now about how Malaysia can take leadership and what he has promised and what ASEAN can do and his commitments. I just learned just now from the younger ones. Of course, I got so much more white hair than you, right? About how we can make reels, right? Can you make reels about what he just said? And then just keep repeating it everywhere. I don't have TikTok because I think TikTok is quite dangerous, but I see that there's there's reels that people do on Facebook, and then when we use Facebook, people say we are too this. That I think even of the environment.
Having these two golden opportunities and also the risk of a missed opportunity, as you said, what is Malaysia's position in and strategy with both these opportunities?
Well, I think I mean I have to be very frank. Before I oversell myself, I think overpromise is that there are bound to be differences. I mean, at the government level, there are things that I have to take into account that perhaps might be different at times from civil society. But I think the most important thing is that there has to be communication. So, for example, with the climate change bill, we shared the consultative paper. It's now public. Anyone can go there, can check what's basically the legislation is going to be about. You can give your feedback if you think that it doesn't go far enough or what. And we'll take that into account before we bring it to Parliament, because that doesn't happen all the time with legislation. Similarly, if we have any plastic bill, I do believe that it has to be very public, because the nature of it, and I don't think, I had the same thing that I said about climate change. I mean, I sincerely believe that when it's something to do with the environment, it should outlive any minister, any government, right? So if it doesn't go far enough, and you have another government that comes into place and they might not be really interested to further the legislation or whatnot, then you're stuck, right? But if it goes far enough, then it sets that further scope that will, regardless, it makes it a bit more difficult for any government then to pull back. So I think we that's the approach that we have, and we know that we really have to be imaginative and creative. There are low-hanging fruits, but I think we have to, because people get used to. It's about habits. So if you talk to someone today, they say, hey, you know, pasar malam, pasar Ramadan and all that, they can't get away from plastic, single-use plastic. But then before the 60s, everyone brought their own bag to the pasar, right? Everyone brought their own tiffin carrier. But it's just that people are used to something, a different habit. So it's not just those who go to very nice malls like this who are very conscious. People were naturally conscious in the past because that was the habit that was there. There were no cheap plastics. So it's just about communicating and about changing how people behave. Even something small as plastic bags. I think when Selangor and Penang introduced it in 2009, I think, there were some complaints. I remember, right? I mean, even for myself, you know, I forget. Then you have to pay. I mean, if you were not so friendly to the environment, you bought the plastic bags, right? 50 cents. But now people in Selangor, in KL, in Penang who are used to it find it that it's easier. But I spoke to a retailer. He said when he introduced the same policy, zero plastic bags in outside the states, it's a bit difficult because it's something new again. So I think that's the sort of push that we need to go and you know get people to change the mindset and have some political will. I seriously don't think you're going to lose elections because of plastic bags, right? So just push it a bit, and you know people will you know slowly adjust to it. And I think it's about having that that belief that you can make that change, right? So I think the approach that we have to be is that we can change habits, and you have to aim to be a bit more ambitious to push things through.
Thank you. Really appreciate. Can we just give him a round of applause for that perspective? Definitely from a citizen activist point of view, it's always felt like almost like kicky, paise, want to trouble anyone kind of tone to introducing regulations, introducing new policies, and even new practices, when really we need strong affirmative action so that we can actually meet the expectations of each other as well. I expect us all to be better citizens, and therefore we will rise and be better citizens. So we're going to move into a Q&A next. So I want you guys to kind of cook a little bit in your head if there's anything you want to pose to any of our panelists. But to close things off, I would love Mages to represent, you know, the voice of the citizen of what you would love to see different in as they are going to these negotiations.
Yeah, so okay. So we are going to talk about the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee meetings that coming up in INC 5. We have been calling, as I mentioned just now, that first that we need to do is like reduce plastic production, because without clear obligations and effective measures, to limit the current growth and production of plastics, the treaty will fail to address the crisis, plastic pollution crisis. It is supposed to end plastic pollution, but it would fail to address the crisis if you don't tackle it at source. So this we will have to look into in terms of the reduced plastic production. And Greenpeace, it's like for 75% cut has to be done, to actually reduce that. And also we need to eliminate hazardous chemicals. You can see there, that's the thing, eliminate hazardous chemicals. So effective measures are needed to globally phase out. It's no point just like national governments doing it. It has to be a global phase out, because plastic is being traded. Plastic is in all the products that we are using right now. So there has to be a phase out and ban hazardous chemicals. So this also includes in terms of the plastic polymers, because some plastic polymers are toxic, like PVC, it is toxic. And this also includes, like what we had already mentioned, in terms of unnecessary and hazardous single-use plastics. Some single-use plastics are totally not necessary at all. So that is number 2. And so we have to prevent hazardous chemicals in the plastics, because even Malaysia is talking about EPR and circular economy. So if you still have toxic chemicals in the plastic, which we are recycling, whatever new product that is coming out is also going to be toxic. So another thing that we want is also, as I mentioned, just now already increased the transparency and traceability in the plastics. So it's whatever chemicals that is going in there. And another thing that is being pushed is like as plastic as a waste management issue. And what they are pushing is all these false solutions. They're talking about plastic credits. They're talking about waste incineration. And they don't call it incineration anymore. They call it waste to energy, because in Malaysia and also all other countries, these communities are against incineration. Malaysia already, the KPKT has already mentioned that they propose to build 18 waste to energy incinerators, incinerators in Malaysia. Yeah, so we are totally against that, because it is not going to be a circular economy. It is not going to be renewed. It is actually not renewable energy, because it is being pushed as renewable energy even in the NETR. So this is not. Yeah, Edmund and I, we were part of the campaign against the Broga incinerators from 2003. Yeah, previously it was Bohol in Kampung Bohol. So this is some of our calls, no false solutions. And okay, we keep on saying we don't want this. What is the alternative? For us, it is not actually an alternative. It was, like as you had mentioned, it was our traditional practice for refilling and reusing. Yeah. So these are the things that we will have to push for. And it is the responsibility of everybody. Yeah, it's the national government, the industry, yeah, because they still continue to produce all this single-use packaging, yeah, which is totally unnecessary. So when we say no plastics, they come up with other ideas, came up with multi-layered. Yeah, YB had also been promoting no single-use plastic bottles, but there was like Tetra Pak. So that is also very it's problematic. So no false solutions. We would want to have just transition for people who are also living in this. And yeah, so there's a lot of things that we are demanding, but first is reduce plastic production.
Thank you so
Yes.
much for that, Marcus. I feel very well represented by that view. Thank you. Questions from the audience.
Hi, I'm Yuan Mei. I have a questions about the environmental due diligence. I would like two analysts to answer. Within the legal framework that we have in Malaysia, the Housing, Local Government and Housing Act, and also the Environmental Quality Act provide provision for community participation. But a lot of time, this is not proactive approach. But environmental due diligence is supposed to be a proactive approach. So within the legal framework, what has to be changed in order to integrate environmental due diligence in Malaysia? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think there are a few aspects to this. In terms of Environmental Quality Act, we currently have the EIA. Some of it we can actually amend, and we are looking at it right now to amend the EIA without even touching the legislation per se, the ACTA, but to go with regards to the regulations, which is directly under the minister as opposed to the act, which you have to go through parliament. Because how do you share? What does what trigger? What sort of level of development does it trigger for a public for an EIA to be shared publicly? So on and so forth. So we are trying to make it more. One is that EIAs are more easily accessible to the public, because now there are certain projects which goes beneath the radar, or sometimes they're very smart. They cut it into parcels, so they do not qualify. They do not cross the threshold, and they can go about with a huge project with that. So we are trying to work on that. But because that one is more immediate, But two is that I think we do need to look into the Environmental Quality Act in itself, because the origin of the act is 1974. It's 50 years. A lot of things have changed. We recently concluded amendment on punishment, maximum penalty for certain environment crimes goes from 100,000 to 10 million ringgit right now. There's mandatory imprisonment of 5 years and all that. But we need to look at the substance of the act itself. What does it cover, and all that. So we while we've done with the penalty side, we want to work into the second phase to look at the crux of the legislation and how it applies. Because I do believe that we need more stringent legislation to make it more thorough and to provide less room for developers or even government entities to get around this legislation.
Just to respond to the question, if you look at there are a few models. The Water Act has a water forum, so you can look at one idea about whether we have a consultative group that's fixed, maybe elected, that can represent the people in some of these projects. Number two is what Minister mentioned about how we can enlarge the scope of the EIA, because EIA is only for certain major projects. And then looking at the punishment issue, I wanted to just add, before I forget, is that I think we need to start prosecuting more directors. So this is something that we have recommended in our 2-year report that we did, the National Baseline Assessment on the Environment. We think that there needs to be more resources in your ministry and in the law enforcement officers. They need to be upskilled. We need to have more of them. But we also need the prosecution to happen against the directors, because they already have statutory defenses of due diligence, but it's not tested in the courts. Because what is happening is that you're only prosecuting the companies. Companies are willing to just pay a high fine, and then they get off after pleading guilty. Sometimes there's no blacklist even. But directors, as we do training for even listed companies, they are not afraid. They are not afraid because they know that even though the law makes them personally liable for the acts of their companies, they know that there's no prosecution that's going to come. So I think that is something which government needs to look at, upskill, and maybe increase the number of
But I do believe that without that one overarching legislation, it will not be progressing at a fast enough pace. So we are looking at even product design, because we've seen the products that we buy, right? Some of it, the packaging is just so much. It's not totally necessary, but they just want to package it that way, right? Why? If you have to use plastics, why do you have to use so much plastics? Those are questions that we can all ask. So we are trying to look at it from the entire spectrum, so that will happen. I think that's all happening, but the main thing is the overall plastic legislation study under the 13 Malaysia plan. So that's next year.
Thank you. Thank you for all those questions. We actually have come to the end of our available time, but I really want to thank our three panelists over here for being so willing to be part of this frank open discussion. Thank you, Nick. I know you've been put into the hot seat a little bit, and as expected from a forum like this, but just as you said, that communication is actually half of the equation. Thank you for being a part of this brilliant discussion where, it didn't feel like we were just skirting around the issue. We just really took it blankly in our face and navigated through it with grace and poise. So thank you, everyone. And for all those brilliant questions as well. Thank you for your attention and for your enthusiasm in being here. Thank you, everyone.
Greenpeace is now very government giving gifts.
What an insightful discussion. Another big round of applause. Okay, before we have the guided tour for Minister Wahidin Asmi, we'll have a handover of a token of appreciation from a representative of Sunway University School of Art and also a representative from the organizer. Yeah. Can we have Wahidin Asmi? Mr. Edmund Mon? Thank you so much.
Yeah, right.
Ms. Marius?
Yes.